Today I'm going to take on the challenge of transforming this free, boring dresser that I got off Facebook Marketplace and turning it into something amazing. So let's see what I could do with it. Now the first thing that I'll have to do is remove all of the hardware. Then I'm going to go ahead and clean this using a good degreaser. I'm using TSP for this, but you can use Dawn dish soap as well, or even Crud Cutter. Now cleaning this dresser might be the most important step because you don't want to end up pushing grease and grime into the surface. When you come back and paint or stain it later, you can end up with stains or chipping and peeling paint, and we don't want that. Now to remove the stain, I'm using 120 grit sandpaper. I'm going to hit all of the surface that I'll be staining later. I'm also going to soak these hinges in some paint thinner because I want to come back and spray paint them black later. Now I'll be honest, I wasn't quite sure of what the outcome was going to be, but I knew I wanted a white dresser with some dark brown highlights. Here I'm using my orbital sander with a 120 grit sandpaper to sand the wood down to the bare wood. Now I'm only sanding those areas to the bare wood that I'll be staining later. Everything else I'm just going to lightly scuff sand because I'm going to be using paint for that. Here I'm just using my shop vac to vacuum the surface so that there's no dust or debris, and then I'll cover the areas that I don't want any paint to get on. Now before I paint the dresser, I'm going to prime it using an oil-based primer. The reason I'm using an oil-based primer is because A, it'll give you the best adhesion and make sure that your final top coat sticks to the surface, and B, it's going to make sure that I don't end up with any tan and bleed. Sometimes when you paint in old wood dressers like this, you end up with coffee-like stains in your final finish, and I'm trying to avoid that, so that's why I'm using this oil-based primer. Now spraying oil-based primer can be a little bit challenging sometimes. What I do is I add some paint thinner to it till I get the consistency of milk, and that makes it so much easier. I let the primer dry for about 24 hours, then I went ahead and filled in all of the holes using this 3M glazing putty. I really like this stuff because it dries super fast and it's really easy to sand. I just use a fine sanding sponge and then I go ahead and prime it again with some oil-based primer. Now this time I'm using an aerosol can, and this is a Sherwin Williams product called Pro Block, but you definitely want to make sure that you spot prime all of the areas that you just fixed. Now while the primer was drying, I went ahead and cleaned off all the hinges. Next, I spray painted them black using this Rust-Oleum Ultra Matte finish. After that, I went ahead and painted the dresser using a urethane enamel. Now originally I didn't want to add any knobs to the dresser, so I went ahead and filled all the old holes using this Bondo wood filler, which is amazing. However, I did end up changing my mind and this was a complete waste of time. But hey, that's what happens when you don't plan ahead, so don't be like me, always plan ahead. Now the product that I'm using to stain the wood is called Minwax, and I really like this stuff. It's really easy to use. I'm just using a sponge to wipe it on. I let it sit for about 2 minutes and then I wipe it back off. Ended up having to do 3 coats to get it to where I wanted it to be. And then for protection, I'm using this Minwax polyacrylic semi-gloss clear coat, and that's just going to make sure that our dresser lasts a long time and that we're protected from scratches and just regular wear and tear. Now I picked up this rope at the hardware store, and I'm going to use this for the pulls. The first thing I did was drill some holes into the front. Then I ended up taking the rope and using some electrical tape to stop it from fraying in the back. And then to keep the rope from sliding out, I just used these 1-inch clamps which locked everything into place. And again, I used some electrical tape to tape the ends so it wouldn't fray. And after putting everything back together, this is the final result. The entire project took me about 3 days, and I want to say I spent around $80 in materials.